You know that 75% of the quotations are from the Greek version, 300 BC or so, not from the Hebrew. Now, mostly, I hasten to tell you, it makes no difference at all. They agree. But there are one or two very key passages where the Septuagint gives us light that probably was made dark by the translators of this particular verse in Hebrew. And I'll show you what I mean. So this is an oracle then of Yahweh, if you want to call him that, Jehovah, we don't know for sure, it doesn't matter really, but it's an oracle addressed to Adoni, my Lord Messiah, Luke 2:11, Messiah Lord. The one got born on that day was Messiah Lord, not God. God cannot be born. Get that idea out of your head. God cannot die. He's immortal. He cannot be born. That's impossible. God doesn't go through the birth canal. That's just absurd. When you get down to verse 3 in Psalm 110, in the Greek version, you have a very interesting statement. I've begotten you from the womb before the morning. My goodness. Begetting is to bring into existence. It's a messianic prophecy. The dawn, as Carlos said earlier, the brightness of the dawn is always, very often at least, a picture of the second coming. Every time you wake up in the morning, you're seeing a vision in some way, a prefiguration of the great dawn, which is the coming of the kingdom at the lightning presence and arrival of Jesus. So before that dawn of the kingdom, God says here in an oracle, I, God, have begotten you, Messiah. I brought you into existence. That should put an end to all the speculation about the so-called pre-existence of Jesus. You cannot come into existence if you already exist. Think about that. I have begotten you before the dawn of the kingdom. That is exactly the virgin birth story in Matthew and Luke. By miracle, God worked on the ovum of Mary. We don't go into we don't concern ourselves with the details of DNA. Forget all that. Jesus has to be the son of Mary to qualify as Messiah, because he has to be the son of the woman. You remember from Genesis. So Mary's part in the miracle there is that the genes of Mary were in Jesus, obviously, have to be. Otherwise, he can't be related as the son of the woman. But not only that, God is the father, Joseph was not. Now, some of you think these are technical details. They're not. Unbelief is punishable by dumbness. You remember when Zechariah failed to believe what the angel said? He was struck dumb for 9 months. You don't want to go there. Scripture is to be believed. Because they did not believe, they'll never be established, Isaiah says. So hang on to the simple belief of the virginal begetting, the action of the Father there, and it's prefigured in Psalm 110, verse 3. So that Psalm 110 is just full of treasures of wisdom and understanding. Matthew has the same thing, Matthew chapter 1. Behold, the virgin will conceive, using the word meaning a technical virgin. He's paralleling this with an event in the time of Ahaz in Isaiah 7, which was partially the same. People get all bent out of shape. They say, well, Matthew said something that Isaiah didn't say. It's true. We need to learn to let God do what he wants to do with Scripture. Matthew, under inspiration, is calling on a parallel, not word for word exact. There was no literal virgin in the Isaiah time who had a baby. I don't think so. But there are parallels. There's a sort of correspondence between the two. Matthew calls on that verse in Isaiah 7. He's going to be Emmanuel, which means with us is God. And then you say, oh, well, he must be God then. No, no, no. We find in Proverbs, a lady had a baby called Ithiel, which means with me is God. God is with me. Did she think her child was God? Of course not. Emmanuel means God is with us. With us is God. Ithiel means God is with me. She looked at the baby and she said, God is really with me giving me this child. That's wonderful. Didn't mean the child was God. All of us had a lot of unlearning to do, and you have to do that by conscientious Bible study. So Psalm 110:1 then, I've begotten you before the dawn. If you could bear this technical point. In the Hebrew version of that psalm, you've got something like, your youth is as the dew. Nobody quite knows what that's supposed to mean. It's probably a corruption by changing the vowel points. if you can bear it in Hebrew, vowel points make a big difference, as they do in English. You know the difference between shipping and shopping. You know the difference between slipping, slopping, and slapping. Only difference of vowels. And I begot you in the Hebrew is probably not right, or there's a different word there in the Hebrew. But in the Greek that we're looking at, the Septuagint, you have I, God, have begotten you. In Hebrew, yeliditicha. If we have Jewish friends out there, they'll recognize that. Yeliditicha, I've begotten you. Now listen to this carefully. If you translate that in a different way by altering the points, you get something like the dew of your youth, yaldutecha. Think about that. Roll that round your tongue. Yaldutecha. Change the points like slipping, slopping, slapping, and you come up with yaliditicha. I have begotten you, which is almost certainly the original. The devil is hard at work in the details, don't we say, to make things difficult for you. That's why you need to study and work and think, and truth is precious. That's the important thing.
Just to expand on this a little bit, we're not alone in thinking there's a corruption. The Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament, Volume 5, the text of Psalm 110:3 is the Masoretic text, that is the Hebrew
text.
Pointed text, is undoubtedly corrupt and requires emendation.
They're playing tricks on you because they don't want you to know that the Son came into existence in the womb of his mother. He has to be human. He's not human if he comes from outside. The idea of a person coming into the womb is really quite strange, not to say pagan and virtually blasphemous. No, Jesus is fully human, but God is his Father, giving him characteristics that we don't fully understand. He was sinless for a start, but he's still a human being. He cannot be God because God cannot be tempted. Jesus was tempted. The idea Jesus is God is very blunt, not to say confusing to the extreme. There's only one God. Once you say Jesus is God, you're presenting two gods. Well, then the UPC people try to cover that up. They say, well, the Father must be the Son. They say, well, we know Jesus is God and we know the Father is God, but there's only one God. So they say, oh, I get it. The Son then must be the Father. That is not going to be viewed as successful Bible study. Wait till the future. People will look back and say, my goodness, were we confused or what?
And I'll just throw in another big name for good measure in case, again, don't believe anything we say, but we're not the only ones. And I have here the TDNT, the aforementioned Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. Under the word yenao, it says yenan is used very rarely of God in the Old Testament, but it occurs in significant passages. Thus, the king addressed in Psalm 2 is begotten of God. That's probably Psalm 2:7. As also the king in Psalm 109, and they have LXX, probably the original, so the Greek version.
That's 110 in our Bible, 110.
But owing to corruption of the Hebrew text, not perhaps unintentional, these words had no influence in Judaism.
That's fascinating. It's a crime scene. There is a devil external. The devil is not in your heart. That's a Christadelphian mistake. There's an external devil who works very hard at making Bible study difficult for you.
Why are the Masoretes, now the Masoretes were Jews from the latter part of the first millennia, so 800, 1000 AD. So that's where we get the Masoretic text. They were a group of Jews called the Masoretes. Why are they acting like later Trinitarians and corrupting their own text to hide the fact that the Messiah is supernaturally procreated in the womb of
well, they didn't believe that. They didn't get it right from Isaiah, and they didn't get it right. They didn't want it here. They're getting rid of the virginal begetting, aren't they? They don't like that idea. They don't think God can have a son by begetting. So they try to get rid of it by altering the vowel points and making a kind of nonsense out of that passage.
So they sort of unwittingly were helping later Orthodox Christians, maybe?
I think so. I don't think they like the idea of God begetting a son. in any natural, in any literal sense. They might have talked, figuratively, allegorically about that, but I think they're trying to get rid of what later became one of the key texts.
I just want to share this, Anthony. This is an interesting timeline of early Christian views about the begetting of the Messiah. So within 100 to 300 years after the New Testament, we got Ignatius talking about God, Jesus Christ, being conceived in the womb. Yes. We got Tertullian on the flesh. God therefore sent down into the virgin's womb his word.
Awful.
And then again, against Praxeas, the Son was sent into the virgin.
Wow.
Malchion, God was in the womb.
Oh.
And then we go further, in Lactantius, enter into her womb.
Wow.
The poem on the Passion of the Lord that is unknown around the 2nd century, I entered the virgin's womb. Hilary of Poitiers, God entered the virgin's womb, and he actually quotes Luke 135.
Oh,
Hilary.
Amazing.
And then much, much later, 400 to 500 years, Saint Theodosius, the Divine Virgin Mother received the living God, the Word, into her virginal and fragrant bridal chamber.
That's amazing.
God in his mercy, Ephraim, or Ephraim the Syrian, God in his mercy stooped and came down and dwelt in the womb. Hymns on the Nativity, the Son who came down and put on a body in the womb. John Chrysostom, God noiselessly and gently entered into the Virgin's womb. The homily in 1 Corinthians, God became man, entered into the Virgin's womb, and so on. So it's a long, torrid history of entering into the womb.
And then you should add Luther, of course, who speaks, commenting on 1 John, where you're to believe, the correct belief is that Jesus was en sarki, which means in human condition, as a real human being, in the sphere of human being. That's the correct view. That didn't quite match with what Luther wanted it to say. So instead of translating correctly in the form of human being, he mistranslated as into human being. That was to create then the capital I incarnation, the difference in German between im Fleisch and ins Fleisch. The latter one means, as all the quotes you were doing there, into the flesh. Doesn't say is sarka, it says en sarki. There's a crime scene going on, and you need to be aware then, and the commentaries usually point these things out to us well.
Again, don't believe anything we're saying. Check the commentaries. They are valuable.
Oh, absolutely.
Mayer's New Testament says exactly that. So, Jesus Christon en sarki.
Yes.
And then it says also to change en into is. So Luther, Calvin, Piscator, and Sander. So they make the note there.
That's very, very good. You found some very good backup. I wasn't aware of that backup. I noticed it, but that's very good support from huge names. These are men who spent their life working at the detail of Scripture in various languages.